podcast is brought to you by the Association for Coaching, one of the world's leading international professional bodies, which is advancing coaching in business and society worldwide. I'm your host, Rosie Nice, executive coach, leadership development consultant, and founder of Magic Coaching. And in this new series, we'll be exploring how organisations can thrive and help their teams reach their full potential by creating a successful coaching culture. I'll be talking with leaders from a wide range of organisations, inviting them to share their personal, real-life experiences of embedding a coaching approach within their workplace, hearing their successes, the challenges they've faced, and the lessons they've learned along the way. Our aim is to offer practical insights and inspire you with the confidence to cultivate an environment where coaching becomes integral to organisational success, a culture of healthy, high performance. So welcome to this episode in our series focusing on building a successful coaching culture. Today's guest is Jan Doyle, a highly experienced training and development consultant who specialises in leadership, coaching and mentoring. Earlier in her career, Jan studied human resource management and held senior leadership roles at British Airways in both the UK and the United States. And then in the year 2000, she went on to establish her own consultancy, U Performance, dedicated to helping people learn, develop and reach their full potential. I've had the pleasure myself of working with Jan over a number of years, and I'm so delighted to welcome her to the podcast today because I know she has a wealth of experience and insights to share. In this episode, we're going to hear how Jan has supported a wide range of clients in different sectors across the world in building strong coaching cultures within their organisations through her tailored training, coaching and consultancy services. We will discuss some of the ways in which Jan's clients define a coaching culture and how a coaching culture looks and feels in practice. We'll hear about the benefits of embedding coaching within an organisation and also explore the challenges and hurdles which might be faced along the way and share some tips and strategies to help us understand how to build a coaching culture. So hi Jan, and a very warm welcome to the podcast, and thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, and thank you for such a lovely introduction. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Lovely. So we're here to talk about building a successful coaching culture. So let's jump straight in, and I'd love to ask you, you've worked with many different organisations helping them build a coaching culture. So what do you think a coaching culture actually is? Could I ask you to start by helping us to define it?
Thank you. That's a really interesting question. I would probably answer that by saying it's what you want it to be. I'll explain what I mean by that as we go through, because moving to a coaching culture is about culture change. And that might be small or it might be large culture change. So I'm going to get you to do a little exercise for me, Rosie. Do you have a pen and a piece of paper with you?
I do, yes, right in front of me.
Excellent. And can I ask you, are you left-handed or right-handed?
I am right-handed.
Okay, so I'd like you to put your pen in your left hand, not your right hand, your left hand. And I'd like you to write your signature on the piece of paper with the wrong hand. So have a go at that.
Okay, right, I've done that.
Okay, so my question to you is, how did that feel?
It felt really uncomfortable. It felt awkward and almost a bit frustrating because it's a bit messy and it felt a bit clunky.
I do that to demonstrate that even that small change, which is switching your hand from your normal hand to your left hand, it evokes a feeling in people. And you said it's clunky, it was awkward. And if you think about any change that we ask people to do in the workplace, it'll feel the same way. So we need to think about, what are we asking people to do that's different to what they normally do? Because it will feel uncomfortable until they get used to it. So it'll start to feel uncomfortable, just as you did there with your pen in the wrong hand. And asking people to move to a coaching culture, the question is, what does that look like, as you said? How do we define it? And when I said it's what you want it to be, it's what you want people, your leaders, your teams to be doing that's different to what they do now. And if I were to sum up what I think it is, it's as simple as shifting from telling to asking. So ask, don't tell. And it's the principles of coaching without being a true coach, as you and I know a true coach. And it's about using that coaching approach in the workplace. So being conscious of switching from telling, stopping and thinking and saying, right, let me ask that person. And asking, what that does for the individual, it helps them to think. It helps them to figure things out for themselves. It allows them to be able to work things out for themselves, but still feel supported and guided, etc. So when we are talking about defining a coaching culture, there probably isn't a dictionary definition for it. There might be. But talking to organizations, it's really saying, what do you want it to be? What do you want people to do differently? And how do you want them to feel? And how are you going to help them get there? So that's my overview of what I think it is.
Fascinating. Thank you. I'm interested that you made a distinction between what you described, I think, as sort of pure coaching and then the coaching that a manager might be doing in the workplace. Can you tell us a little bit more about that distinction?
When I go into different organizations, or having worked in many organizations, we often hear people saying to managers, you need to coach. You need to be a coach. And often people don't know what that is. So it's helping people to understand what's the difference between coaching and then when should I do that? Or when should I use that coaching approach, which is questioning? And when do I use other strategies, if you like? So when should I put my mentoring hat on, if I use the hat analogy? When should I give advice? Or when should I be a trainer? Put my training hat on because they don't know what to do. Or indeed, when should I just listen because it's about well-being and almost putting your counselling hat on? So making that choice between which approach is going to be the right approach in this circumstance as a manager is really important. And thinking about what the organisation is asking me to do. As a coach, you and I know that we would be asking people about what their goal is. Where do they want to get to? Being able to get them to come up with things themselves with the goals or the objectives in mind. And what obviously we have in a work scenario is we have the objectives, the targets that are set by the organisation. And that is around how do I help people achieve that? Rather than saying, well, where do you want to go and how do you want to get there and things like that. But it's about how are we going to achieve this goal of be it sales or service or whatever it is. Because the organisation has set the goals. So the aim of using a coaching approach is to help the people that you're managing to think about, well, what do I need to do to get there? What should I be doing? How should I behave, etc.? And it's helping them in that sense. So looking at it from that perspective.
I love the analogy you're using of a manager adopting a coaching approach and having different hats that they're wearing as part of their role. The coaching hat, the training hat, the leading hat, and being conscious. And I guess one of the skills, therefore, is about knowing which hat do I wear in certain scenarios, although I may be using a coaching approach through my leadership, my management, etc.
Often when we've been training people or within consultancy within an organisation, there's a kind of light bulb moment that comes on when we talk to people about that. And they say, I haven't thought about it that way. Choosing when to decide this needs training because they don't know how to do it. So let me train. But you can use a coaching approach to do it. What do you think you could do? And if they don't know, we do need to teach them. But it's also differentiating between each of those and choosing the right strategy.
So it sounds like from your experience, and I think my own experience echoes this as well, is that there's not one single way of defining a coaching culture. It means different things in different organisations. Different organisations might interpret it in a different way, but there are a lot of similarities in terms of making the shift from telling people what to do towards asking people, towards engaging people, towards helping people come up with their own solutions as part of the way that we lead and manage people.
Absolutely. Often what happens is organisations or people that we talk to, they don't realise that the coaching culture is what they need. Because what they're looking at is the end result and how do I get there? So it's a means to an end, put it that way.
Interesting. And I think that's something that we're going to come back to as we continue our conversation. So you've worked with a wide range of organisations, helping them build a coaching culture. So can you see any similarities between the organisations that you've worked with who are looking to embed coaching into their workplace? Can you see any patterns or any shared characteristics across the different sectors that you've worked with?
Yeah, I've worked with IT companies, financial services, travel companies, shops, you name it, across the globe. And often what we will do is we'll ask people, think of the best manager or the best leader that you've ever come across. And we identify what are the characteristics of what it is about them. And what they are describing are the characteristics of a coaching culture. So what happens is we'll say, what are the skills people need? What's the knowledge? And what's the behaviour? And invariably, when we ask them to write down what is it that makes the best leader, it's the behaviours that come out as these are the things that made the difference. So the behaviours that we see right across these organisations, right across the globe, are things that people are looking for from their leader, are things like empathy, respect, support, inspiration, encouraging, guiding. And they tell us that's what made the difference. That's what it was that made them the best leader. So that's the kind of similarities that I see are what people, no matter where you are in the world, are asking for from the people that manage them. And therefore, looking at that and developing a coaching culture is being able to help managers and leaders to demonstrate support, inspiration, respect, encouragement, guidance, etc. And using a coaching approach allows them to do that.
So it sounds like that when you are asking people to describe the characteristics of the best leader they've ever had, what they're actually doing is describing the behaviours of a coaching leader and a leader who uses a coaching approach. And I guess underneath the different sectors, the different areas that people work in, underneath it, people are people. And people often tend to respond really well to coaching behaviours.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's helping people thrive, helping people develop, helping people realise, oh, I didn't know I could do that, rather than just telling them what to do. Do this, do that, do the other. And actually helping them to enjoy, helping them to feel satisfaction in their jobs.
So, Jan, if a company approaches you and they perhaps come to you and say, we would like some leadership development, we would like to bring coaching into our workplace, and they're asking for your consultancy experience, what role do you tend to play? So how have you supported your clients along the journey? What do you actually do for your clients?
The first thing really is sometimes we will be approached, as you know, and you and I work together, and they'll say, we need some training. We need some training. And actually, the best question to ask is why? What's happening? Where are you at the moment? And sometimes when we say, well, if that's where you are, where do you want to get to? Sometimes it's a bit fuzzy and hazy. So helping the organisation to think about what is it you want to achieve? What's the aim here? What's the vision? What is it that you want to see people doing differently? And therefore, what can you do to get there? And sometimes training isn't necessarily the answer. I mean, we often do the training, obviously, but there's a whole plethora of other things that they could do internally to support them rather than just relying on training. And that's where that coaching culture and how do I develop that coaching culture? Because often people will come on what we call sheep dip training and they'll say, right, fine. They've been on the training, they should know what to do. And what we do encourage is use coaching to embed the learning after the training session. And that's what we do to be able to help people. What are the mechanisms that we can put in place jointly to help the organisation embed learning from the training and embed how do we develop people to develop the skills or develop the behaviours that we're looking for. And that is about helping the managers to understand what's my role and how do I coach and what does that mean. So there's quite a lot to it to be able to think about what could I put in place in an organisation. But on a simpler form, it doesn't have to be that complicated. It could be as simple as I said at the very beginning, just start asking, not telling as well. So you can develop that coaching culture and think about what are the changes we need to make, where do we want people to get to, and how we're going to get there.
One of the things that I've seen, certainly in my work in supporting organisations developing a coaching culture, is sometimes people will ask us to run a coaching skills course for their leaders, which we will happily do. The leaders and the managers are really inspired. They love it. They want to go back and start to use their new skills. And sometimes they're met with confusion from their teams who are responding with, "Why are you asking me so many questions? Why are you managing me in a different way?" And I think one of the gaps sometimes is that we need to spread the word to everybody. So there's something around helping the teams, the individuals, everybody in the organisation understand what coaching is and what a coaching culture is. Has that been your experience as well?
Yeah, it's being able to educate everyone, not just the managers, as you say, in being able to say, well, where do we want to get to? But making sure that the leaders and the senior leaders have clarity on where do we want to go to? What are we trying to achieve here? And what role does everyone play? What's my part in this? Not having something being done to me, but actually, what part do I play? Where's the responsibility on my part to be able to respond to that? And educating what does a coaching culture look like for the teams is really, really important as well.
So it's helping people engage in coaching. So what are the benefits for me and how do I respond when my manager is adopting a coaching approach?
Yeah, absolutely.
And when your clients are thinking about building a coaching culture and investing in their leaders and their development, what benefits do you think they can gain from this process and what results can they expect to see?
That's the key, is what's the end result here? Can I give you an example of when I was a manager?
Lovely.
Where we did a big culture change program. We looked at, and this was in a call centre environment, about 700 staff. And when I first started in this role, we said, where do we want to get to? What's the goal here? And the remit was to change the culture to focus on customer loyalty and sales. Now, bear in mind, the organisation had been there for many years and they were very good at service on the telephone. They were answering questions, they were giving service. They weren't capitalising on sales. So that was one of the things to be able to develop, sales through service. And if I say the culture was very much historically one of command and control. So our aim was to think about, right, how do we develop this sales culture through using coaching and a coaching culture? So we set our targets around what does that look like? What do we want to achieve? And then we started to think about, well, how are we going to get there? And some of the strategies that we deployed, and this took a little while, but it was thinking about, well, the team sizes had historically been 30 plus. So we reduced them down to look at 10 to 12 people in a team. So very small teams. Yes, it was a cost to the business, but what we could see was the benefit of the return on investment through improved sales. So outweighing the cost versus the revenue. So yes, reducing down the teams. We introduced new roles for the team leaders. We redefined what they would be doing. Rather than supervising, they were there as the coach, as the leader, and therefore coaching people and developing them. We put in some behavioural standards around how do we want people to behave? What kind of skills do they need? What skills should they be displaying? We then, of course, training again, but it was all part of a big picture. We invested in training for the managers and the teams in how to coach and how to be able to develop their teams, how to ask rather than tell. We also looked at putting in a performance management mechanism that helped people with regard to what's the performance that we're looking for and therefore how do we get you there. Very much focused on the positive as to how do we motivate them, what are you doing well, what could you change that would improve, and therefore focused on development. We looked at team meetings and team time, we called it. So how do we actually give time back to them so that they can discuss how they're doing, what they're doing? Yes, again, cost to the business because they weren't then doing the normal job. But again, we could see that return on investment as we went through. Other things like incentive programs, motivation programs. So there was a whole plethora of things that went on around, not just the training, but mechanisms internally that we implemented. And we did see a huge increase in service results. We saw a huge increase in sales, and we actually had a much happier, engaged workforce. So that in itself shows that even at a cost to the business, you've got to think some of these things will result in the return on A, B, or C. So that was a kind of example of my experience.
And it's a great example. And what I think it shows really well is that a coaching culture is a lovely thing, but it is a means to an end, which you said very early on in the conversation. This is a means to an end. We are bringing in, we want a great place for people to work. We also want to be a successful business. So you were bringing in the coaching culture here as a means to driving revenue, to increasing service, to increasing sales and business success.
The other thing I wanted to just mention as well, and that we often forget, is who's managing the managers. I often say that. Who manages the managers? Because often we'll say, right, you're trained, I've trained you, off you go. And actually, what mechanisms are put in place to support the managers in making sure they are upskilling themselves, making sure they're doing what we want them to do. So that's where that buy-in from the senior managers and training the senior managers in how to coach and what does that look like. So helping people in that way to think about how do we support each other, whatever level we're at.
And you raise an interesting point there, and something that I've heard a lot is we may train team leaders, middle managers, even senior managers, and they love the coaching training. They feel they've got a new skill they can use. They use it with their teams, they get great results, but they say to us, I wish I was getting this myself. I wish my manager, my senior manager, my leader would coach me. What would you say to a manager who is saying, I'm putting it all into practice, but I'm not getting coaching myself? How do they cope with that situation?
You and I have had this before where people have said that to us. What I always say is, be the best manager you can be. So even if you're not getting it from your manager, or even if other people in the department are not using a coaching approach, if you are doing it, then at least that's one tiny little step in the right direction. Because if you can help your team, motivate them, engage them, make them feel valued, make them feel like they have a voice, allow them to have that psychological safety to have their voice and be able to point them in the right direction. And this is where coaching has to, on using a coaching approach, has to link into feedback and being able to give feedback in a way that is useful, that is developmental, that people can actually see the value in the way you give the feedback as part of a coaching culture. And you can give feedback in a way, I could say to you, you're doing this really well. Or I could say, what do you think you're doing well? So all I've done is change it into a question. And then I could say, yeah, this is what I've seen you do well. Well done. And then I could ask you, what do you think you could do differently there? And you get people to think about it. And I could say, yeah, I saw that. One thing that you could do differently is this. So actually giving feedback in a way that is useful and helpful is part of developing performance, developing people, and is part of that coaching culture, which I guess is back to your question earlier. How is it different in an organisation to pure coaching that you and I use as a coach? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the idea of engaging people in self-reflection and in raising their self-awareness by asking them, what do you think you're doing well? So feedback isn't something that's done to me in the coaching culture that we're building. It's something that I can almost give myself feedback. And as the manager, you're reinforcing, giving examples, helping me to develop my own self-awareness and self-reflection skills. I love the idea of, if I'm a manager and I am the only person who wants to adopt a coaching approach, I can still do that with my team. Regardless of what's happening around me, I can bring a coaching culture into my team by asking more questions, by raising people's self-awareness, by getting people involved. So I'd love to have coaching myself, but even if I'm not, I can still build that coaching culture. And it sounds like I can start that tomorrow. If I can start to just ask a few more questions, I can start to build that coaching culture in a very simple way.
Yeah, and interestingly, it's noticing in yourself when you go into tell mode. So very often we haven't got time, people are busy, and maybe someone comes up to you and they go, how do you do this? Or I'm not sure what to do. And we go into, right, what you need to do is... Because we're nice and we're helpful and we want to help. And we tell them, we go, all right, what you need to do is. And actually, the skill or the technique I always say is, instead of going in with, right, what you need to do is you're exhaling. Just take a breath and inhale and go, and inhale, and it stops you. And instead of saying, right, what you need to do is, just stop, inhale, think about the question and say, so what do you think you could do? Where might you find that? What is it that you want to find out here? Who might help you? So there's lots of questions that allow you to point the person in the right direction that will help the person figure things out for themselves. And what that does for the individual, it helps them think, but it also helps them to take on responsibility for finding things out. Otherwise, they'll just keep coming to you and asking. And you'll go, right, what you need to do is next time. What you need to do is next time. So just stop, notice, think, inhale, and then ask the question. So give yourself that thinking time to figure out the question.
Absolutely. So let's say I'm really thinking about building a coaching culture in my organisation. You've talked about some of the benefits. We've talked about the results that we can expect to see. What do you think are some of the challenges that you've seen organisations face? What are some of the hurdles that I might need to prepare for if I'm embarking on this cultural change of bringing in coaching?
I would say buy-in from senior managers. But as you say, even if it's not a full-blown programme, it's what am I going to do with my little team, even if I manage one person, or if I manage 10, or if I manage 10,000? What am I going to do? But really looking at an organisation, having that clarity of where they want to get to, and everyone saying, right, this is how we're going to get there. It might be implementing training or making sure we have a performance management mechanism, or how we're going to make sure that people are coaching, etc. The other thing is people are habitual. So they have a habit of doing what they've always done. So getting people to change, or that resistance to change, is probably a challenge, if you like, to overcome. So giving them the right skills, encouraging them, and as I say, managing the managers to help them. And probably the biggest one is time. Oh, I haven't got time to coach. I haven't got time. I just tell them what to do. And actually, if you haven't got time, sometimes tell them what to do. But actually think about, when's the opportunity? When is the opportunity to use a coaching approach? Because it's not going to be all the time. It is going to be, let me just stop, and could I ask a question here to be able to coach this person? If they come to you and say, oh, this happened, that happened, that happened, and you want to go, right, do this, just stop and think, have I got time here? Is this a good opportunity to use this time to be able to say, well, what do you think? Where might you find that? What kind of things do you think you could do? Is there anyone else that might be able to help you? So looking at how do you make time for coaching, and at the right time in the right place, I would say is probably the thing that's up against you as well.
And I guess there's two different things we're talking about there. There's having one-to-ones with our people and turning that into a coaching conversation.
Yeah.
That's one way of coaching, but there's also coaching being the way that we lead and manage. So it's not something that I do between 10 and 11 on a Monday morning when I've got my one-to-one with you. Coaching is the way that I have my conversations.
Yes.
And this is something we've talked to managers about, that it's not just, I coach you between 10 and 11 on a Monday, and the rest of the time, I tell you what to do. It's shifting the way that I have my interactions with people. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely. And as I say, think about when's the opportunity, practice some of those questions. You can do it at home, you can do it with your family, you can do it with your friends. So just have a go at changing things slightly. And what you'll find is you get a better connection. It's about building relationships. It's about engaging people. It's taking an interest in them. It's about curiosity. It's being able to help them to think things through and come up with their own ways of doing things. And what you'll then find is much better engagement, much more satisfaction in the jobs that they do.
And we do often hear people saying that coaching skills are life skills. And we hear people saying, oh, I'll try this with my children. I certainly know that my coaching skills helped me when my children were teenagers. And shifting from how are we going to work through this challenge, this issue, this problem, as opposed to this is what you're going to do, helped me through a few difficult situations. And I know that a lot of people that we've worked with have also said, okay, I'm going to change the way I have some of these conversations in other parts of my life as well.
So it doesn't have to be a massive big program within an organization. It could be for a coaching culture, or it can be in that this is where we're going, this is what we're going to do, etc. It could be as small as, I have a small team, let me just think about how do I engage them more. So got a whole raft of things that you could be doing.
So can I ask you to give us a couple of examples? I understand, of course, you're bound by client confidentiality. So could I ask you to give us just a couple of examples of anonymized journeys that your clients have been on in there that you've worked with over the years?
Yep, sure. There's lots, but I could think of one particular client, which is in the financial services arena. Probably about 200-300 people work there. And they found that a lot of their work is intense. So there's a lot of stress involved in financial services, of course. Some of the leaders had not had much training. They found that people were leaving and they wanted to have a look at how do we develop a culture where people feel valued, where people are happy, where people can talk to each other, where they feel safe to be able to do that. And that was the organisation looking at overall programme of how do we do this. So in a nutshell, some of the things that we helped them to implement were leadership training for their leaders, and not just their middle managers, but their senior leaders as well. Looking at the different skills of coaching, being able to say what leadership is, what it isn't, helping them to look at their own behaviours. And often what we do is we take a mirror with us, don't we, Rosie?
We do.
And we actually hold up the mirror and say, is this you? Or is this you? Which one are you? And therefore, how do we help people to help the leaders to look at themselves and adjust their style of leadership, their approaches, develop their skills, etc. So that's part of a leadership training program that we implemented. The other things that we've done one-to-one coaching to embed the learning after the training and help people to think about how am I interacting with my team members. So that one-to-one coaching with individual managers where we have actually coached them and helping them to think about how do I develop my coaching skills, etc. So we did that. What else did we do? We've done group coaching sessions where we get a group of leaders together and we look at some of the areas that they want to focus on, and they then can help each other and coach each other through approaches and how we do that. We do power skills, where we do maybe a 45-minute, even an hour-long super skill session on things like emotional intelligence, variety of different things, questioning techniques, etc. So that is really in a larger organisation how we've approached and supported. And of course, it was initiated, a lot of it, through ongoing conversations, not just them coming to us going, train us. We've helped them think about their approach as well. If I took a smaller organisation now, then it would be, for an example, an IT company, a very small one, maybe 20 people. And what we've done is we've developed a behavioural framework with them, in working with them to say, what are the behaviours you're looking for from your teams? And we've looked at what they want and what they don't want and developed that into a framework so that then they will go out and look at how do we communicate this with people about expectations. We've developed a leadership framework, and we're going to look at how we utilise that framework and embed that into the training, the leadership training that we're doing. And then, if you think of an individual, we've helped them by one-to-one coaching, as I mentioned earlier, and that might be private clients or within an organisation where we've done a series of coaching sessions with each of the managers. And that, what do you want to change within your team? And how are you approaching your team? What could you do differently? And thinking about how they can actually develop a coaching approach just on an individual level within their own small team. So really, if you look at the large organisation, the smaller organisation, or even just an individual, it's what I said at the very beginning, is coaching culture is what you want it to be. So you can define what you want it to be and how you're going to get there.
Lovely. Thank you. So as we come to the end of the conversation, Jan, it's been such a good discussion and we've covered a lot of ground. So can I ask you, thinking back to everything that we've talked about during our conversation, what advice would you give to an organisation who is considering embarking on this journey? If there was one tip that you would give, what would that be?
Oh, I think we've said it all along, haven't we? Ask, don't tell. So just have that shift into, let me ask, what's the question here? So let me ask this person and allow them time. Listen to the person's response. So all of those lovely coaching skills, apply them on a daily basis.
That's a great tip because we can all do that. It's very empowering. We can all start doing that straight away and have that self-awareness of, oh, here I am telling people what to do again. Let me see if I can change that into, what do you think? One of my favourite managerial leader coaching questions. What do you think? Perfect. Thank you. So I'm sure our listeners have been learning a lot from what you've shared with them today in our conversation. So if people are interested in connecting with you, what's the best way of somebody listening to this podcast? What's the best way of them connecting with you, Jan?
Oh, you can connect via LinkedIn if you wish. I'm on there. And also you could connect via our website, which is www.uperformance, that's the letter U, performance.co.uk. So please do get in touch, and if you've got any questions or want to have a chat, then by all means do.
Lovely. Thank you. Well, I've really enjoyed our discussion today. Thank you so much for coming along, Jan, and sharing your expertise and your insights. It's been absolutely fascinating. So thank you very much.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another podcast by the Association for Coaching. For over 20 years, our purpose has been to inspire and champion coaching excellence, advance the coaching profession, and make a sustainable difference to individuals, organisations, and society. To find out more about the AC and our member benefits, follow us on LinkedIn or visit our webpage at associationforcoaching.com. Explore our digital learning hub and enjoy our extensive library of on-demand webinars, interviews, podcasts, and a portfolio of live events featuring thought leadership, tools, models, and the latest industry trends to help you develop your coaching expertise.